Myself Supriya Konda, working as an assistant professor in civil department from Walchand Institute of Technology, Solapur. So today's class we are going to discuss the fore bearing and the back bearing. These are the learning outcomes. At the end of this session, students will be able to impart the knowledge of fore bearing and back bearing. So the bearing of a survey line is nothing but the horizontal angle which the line makes. So just I will tell you, there are two types of the bearing. One is called as the quadrantal bearing and second is called as the whole circle bearing. So in the whole circle bearing, always the angles are measured with respect to the north, whereas the quadrantal bearing, the angles are measured with respect to north or south. So just I will tell you by drawing the quadrant wise system. So let's say this is the north, south, east and west. So if you divide it into each quadrant, so let us say this is the first quadrant, the second one, the third quadrant and the fourth quadrant. So can we give the angles over here? So the first quadrant, it will be divided into 0 to 90 degrees. So the first quadrant consists of the angles between 0 to 90 degrees, whereas the second quadrant, it will be 90 degrees to 180 degrees. And the third one, 180 degrees to 270 degrees. That is the angles between 180 degrees to 270 degrees will be in the third quadrant. Whereas the fourth quadrant, it consists of 270 degrees to 360 degrees. So likewise, all the quadrants, they are divided into angles. So each quadrant consists of 0 to 90 degrees. So let's say how to measure the bearing of a line. I will just show it by taking the survey line in each quadrant. So let's say this is north, south, east and west. So if a survey line is drawn in the first quadrant, so let's say this is the line OP. It makes an angle of 45 degrees. 45 degrees. So it is with respect to north. It is moving towards the east direction. So how will you write the bearing of this line OP? The bearing of the line can be written as N 45 degrees east. So it is making an angle of 45 degrees from north with respect to north towards east direction. So it is east. That means you have to show the survey line in the first quadrant. Right? If the bearing is given to you as north 45 degrees east, so from the notification of the angle, the survey line has to be drawn in the first quadrant. If the bearing of the line is given to you as north 100 degrees south, so that the bearing will be in the second quadrant. So with respect to north you have to take. So let's say this is the angle which makes an angle of 100 degrees. It is towards the south direction. So it is making an angle of north 100 degrees south. So it is moving towards south and it is more than 90 degrees. That's what it comes in the second quadrant. So let us say this is the survey line OR. So next, if the bearing is more than 180 degrees, between 270 degrees, 180 to 270 degrees, how will be the or what will be the bearing of that line? So always the bearings are to be taken with respect to north. So north 250 degrees west. So from north it should be passed on to the west. That's it. It comes in the third quadrant. So let us say this is the survey line OR 250 degrees. So this is 180 degrees, 270 degrees. So this angle, it comes out to be 250 degrees. So let's say this is 0 degrees, 90 degrees. Yes, the bearing of the line, that is north 250 degrees west. So as the angle is more than 180 degrees, it comes in the third quadrant, and the angles are measured with respect to north. So from the north itself we are going to measure the angle towards the east direction. So next, if the, let's say the survey line is in the fourth quadrant, so what will be the fourth quadrant, that is north. How much will be the angle? So north, it is given as 320 degrees. North 320 degrees. So let's say it comes in the fourth quadrant. The angle is 320 degrees. So from the, always you have two types of bearing, that is called as the whole circle bearing. So always the angles are to be measured with respect to north. Whereas in the quadrantal bearing, you have the angles to be measured with respect to south or north. Just I will give you an example. Here we are saying as north 25 degrees west. If this bearing has to be written with respect to south, what it will be? This one. If you consider this angle, it is 180 degrees. So 180 degrees, total you have 250 degrees minus of 180 degrees, it comes out to be 70 degrees. So can you write the bearing of this line OR is south 70 degrees towards west direction. So this is what the quadrantal bearing is. If the angle is given to you as south 70 degrees west, that means this bearing has to be measured with respect to south, and it is given as it is going from the south towards the west direction. So that's it, the bearing has to be written in, has to be drawn in the third quadrant, where it is from the south it is moving towards the west direction. If suppose the bearing, let's say this this itself you can consider north 45 degrees towards east. So as the direction is mentioned that the survey is in the angle of the survey line, that is 45 degrees, it's making with respect to east. So that is towards east it is moving. So that's what the bearing has to be measured with respect to north. If suppose here you have 360 degrees, so here the angle is given to you as 320 degrees. So you can see the bearing of the line OS will be equal to 360 degrees minus of 320 degrees. The remaining angle comes out to be 40 degrees. So 40 degrees is this angle. The remaining angle is 40 degrees. So the bearing of this line, if you consider the quadrantal bearing, it can be written as north 40 degrees, it's moving towards west direction, it is west. So this is what the difference between the whole circle bearing and the quadrantal bearing is. So always the angles will be measured with respect to north or south. You can see here is north and here is south. So this is the case of the quadrantal bearing, where the angles has to be measured with respect to north or south. Whereas the whole circle bearing, always the angles are measured with respect to north only. So this I have just tried to explain you by giving an example over here. So always from referring to the bearings, you are supposed to draw the traverse in which you have given number of points or 4 stations which are given to you. It may be 4 in number or 5 in number. So with reference to the bearing of the survey lines, you are supposed to draw the traverse, and the traverse should be in such a way that it should be a closed traverse, not an open traverse. By referring to all the bearings, at the last the traverse has to be closed. So let's see. These are the MCQs. The direction of the survey line, it can be either established with relation to. So below are the options. First one, you have the each other, main station, arrows and the tie station. So let's see which is the right answer for that. Yes, first one is the right answer for that. That is the direction of the survey line. It can be established with relation to each other. That's it. it has to be mentioned whether it is with respect to north or with respect to south. And even when the bearing of the survey line is taken in the quadrantal bearing or in whole circle bearing, it is given with respect to 2 points or with each other, that is north or towards east direction, or whether it is going from north or towards the west direction. And the same can be applied in the quadrantal bearing also. The bearings are mentioned with respect to north or south, and it's against each other. That means it is the angle is given from the south or north with respect to east and west. So that's what the MCQ is asked in this. So these are the references which I have referred. Thank you.